Okay, so the next topic we're going to discuss is this is one that I must admit, when I heard the news about this and to know that it's going down very soon, makes me very concerned for how this is going to impact us. Well, it impacts everybody, but also to impact gamers especially, and that is net neutrality. So, Gary, I believe that you have something you wanted to say just to give people an idea of exactly what this is if they haven't heard about it. But I'm pretty sure if you've been watching the news, you know exactly what we're talking about. So, Gary, please feel free to share your insight as to what this is exactly and how it can impact gamers.
Yeah, so a lot of the cable companies and I guess the governing bodies in the states and everything, um they want to kind of push this anti-net neutrality bill, and the aim is to put power back into the hands of the cable companies and stuff like that, and the internet service providers, so that they would have control over, the content that you have access to, with your internet and everything. So they can restrict websites. They can, they can throttle services like Netflix so that, you can't access them without paying a little extra. Like you would have to probably pay the cable company more if you want to access these services. And then on the back end, companies like Netflix would probably have to pay the cable companies as well, so that their service would even be available, you know. And this trickles down to gaming too, because they could do the very same thing with your online gaming, your Xbox Live or PSN, or, the Nintendo Switch service and everything. Like they can restrict that if they wanted to. And that's a big problem, because we should, like, everyone should have the freedom to use the services that they want to online, as long as you're not doing anything illegal. Then you should be able to access these things. And I think it's wrong, it's completely wrong to block access to websites and stuff like that. And we know that the cable companies are mad because services like Netflix and uh I forgot the name of the other one, but yeah, companies like Netflix are taking away money from them because they're giving us all this content that we legit want to see. And more people are thinking, what, why am I paying for cable? Like, why am I paying for these channels? Like, I should just watch stuff on Netflix and Hulu and Amazon and all these different services. So the cable companies are salty like that, because of that. And they want to take control of the internet and restrict what you actually have access to unless you pay them. So this is their way of taking control back, and making sure that more people will then be watching cable instead. So yeah, this affects a lot of gamers, because not only can they restrict gaming access, but also a lot of gamers are nerds like us, and we're into stuff like Netflix and Hulu and Amazon, and we're into the more kind of indie content, if you will, and independent content services and stuff like that. And yeah, I think whenever you have a government or organizations like that who are in control of what you see on the internet, I think that's a bad thing anyway, because everyone should have access to the things that they need to know. And like, you should have access to knowledge even, like, and if they're going to go out of their way to restrict websites and stuff like that, I think that's a very bad thing for the education of humanity. Like, people should have access to whatever they need, as long as it's not illegal, like I said. But yeah, very big issue. I'm sure Dana and JJ also have some thoughts on it as well. But there is a website that you guys can go to in the US. It's called battleforthenet.com. So you can go there, and it has a form where you can type in what state you're in and everything like that, and it will send like a letter or email or something to your local governing body in each state. And then you can try and fight this bill going through. So I think everyone should do that, take the time to do that. because this is something that's going to affect all of us. You know, even the coalition. This could affect the coalition. So, yeah.
I agree. Let me just make a quick comment, and then I'm going to get JJ's opinion. I sense that Comcast knows that we were having this discussion, because while you were talking, literally, I started having issues with my internet. So now everything is fine, but I don't know what the hell is going on. Mr. Lugo, do you have any thoughts?
I mean, Gary pretty much summed it up pretty well, but here's the thing. There's many parts to this, and it's been an ongoing thing that's been happening for, I want to say, the last couple of years, because there's been stuff in the news that I remember reading about. One of the big problems with this and why net neutrality is so important is because technically the cable companies or the ISPs could hold businesses hostage. And the way they do that is that they'll be able to slow down and speed up certain businesses based on preference, usually based on if a company pays a premium. So a lot of the smaller startup companies, a lot of the companies like even the Koalition, you know, as a smaller media outlet compared to other outlets out there, or even just companies that just want to use the internet and use a website to sell off their products, because they can only pay so much, and because they're not like multi-million-dollar companies out there, they'll kind of get stuck in the mud, you know, with lackluster internet speeds or just lackluster connections. And it creates this disparage, this inequality amongst people online, you know, from surfing the internet, from being able to exchange information and all this different type of stuff. So that's the real issue here. It gets a little bit more complicated with the way that it's explained in a number of different sources, including the website that Gary talked about, was it battleforthenet.com? Basically, where the legislation that's being pushed right now is to change the internet as a utility from, I believe it's a tier 3 to a tier 2, which would make it so that way the government doesn't have the ability to stop companies from doing that sort of things, to stop them from actually regulating the speeds at which people are able to connect to the internet. Or more specifically for businesses, that it really affects businesses out there a lot, you know, in places for specifically kind of like Netflix, you know, because that was the big example we used before. But for the common person, this would be the first step towards something even worse, which would be not only just the inequality in internet connections, which you'll have to pay more if stuff like this goes down, which looks like it's going to, but also this is the first steps towards companies or ISPs blocking out specific websites from you looking at them at all. So it's not just like the bad stuff, or not stuff like porn, or not stuff like, you know, things that you would expect, you know, people to kind of raise an eyebrow at. But like even just their competition, you know, other websites like AT&T and Comcast, even though they're not really in competition like that, they're kind of in cahoots and kind of like a pseudo monopoly, not monopoly. And the same thing also for any other types of like better alternatives. So imagine, okay, Google Fiber, right? Google Fiber, people have been trying to push for that to get posted around the United States all over the place, including out in California, which is where they're really pushing that. Imagine not being able to see any information about that, or be able to visit their website if you live on the East Coast, because it's pretty much dominated by Comcast, and they don't want their competition being spread around or giving people alternatives, because they obviously want you to stay more with Comcast, or they want you to depend on them. It's kind of like that now to an extent, without the censorship, or without really the companies being able to do something as crazy as like that. But you know, it's still primarily dominated over here on the East Coast by places like Comcast, Xfinity, etc. But overall, as far as gaming is concerned, Gary and Rich are right. It is going to affect our ability to play games online, which adds a whole nother layer of problems on top of what we already have now at this point. The United States is kind of behind a lot of countries, specifically Japan and in places in Europe, with the quality of internet connection that they have out there. Not just because it's a smaller country, Japan specifically, but also in the way that they build their lines. I believe it's in Japan, the government has control of like how the internet connections are built, how the internet and the power lines and stuff like that are built, as well as also being able to make it readily available to the general public. So you could like walk around Tokyo and get free internet, free Wi-Fi that's regulated by the federal government. That allows you just to freely just get connected to it. And there's no like crazy restrictions like what we were mentioning before. We don't really have that here in the United States. We only have like certain places, like in certain cities, that offer something like that and offer it in such like a free open basis like that. But this type of stuff, that what they're pushing now, would totally kill that. That would kill any sort of possibility like that whatsoever. And it's a shame, because a lot of this is mostly due to agendas that don't have the people's best interest in mind. It's really about not only people that are already rich and already controlling a large sum of money getting even more richer, but also trying to push out everybody else in order to keep them in a position that they're comfortable with. And that sucks. We see a lot of that in politics now, but with something like this, that it's going to really affect everybody, especially YouTube. Imagine if any of these companies get really pissed off at YouTube, because of like the whole piracy thing and a lot of the other political stances and political opinions that are being thrown out there in places like YouTube and other social media. Imagine all of a sudden that they start slowing down YouTube. Or imagine if they start making it much more difficult for people to access YouTube, to access Twitter, to access Instagram, to access Facebook, because of varying different opinions and other stuff that has nothing to do with really what's at the heart of the issue. That would suck. And that's what we're starting to see, at least the first rumblings about. I think this is only going to get worse too. Like I'm a little bit more of the pessimist when it comes to a lot of these type of topics when we talk about it. But I feel like this is going to be something that next year, if not in 2019, we're also going to see get worse before it gets any better, if it gets any better in the first place. I feel like a lot of people need to talk about it more. We need to have a lot more YouTubers, even though we have a lot of YouTubers and content creators that are speaking out about this. We need to have even more people. We have to have people a lot more aggressively talking about it and putting it out there so people take action and stop talking about it. If you understand what I'm saying, it's one thing to talk about. It's one thing to make people aware about stuff, but you got to encourage people to take more action. You got to take action yourself. You got to guide people sometimes into taking action in order to make some real change happen.
I agree. 100%. Absolutely. Dana, you have any thoughts on net neutrality?
I think it's very unfortunate, but I think that, we're going to start slowly losing rights anyway. So sorry to be the Debbie Downer.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I
do
elaborate
agree
on that.
Well, go ahead.
What do you mean? It's going to pass, and we're going to just, have to suffer with it.
Man, I hope not.
Well, I'm like 90% sure.
Yeah, they said December 7th, it will get signed. So, yeah, I'm very curious to see what happens as a result of this. I mean, I agree with pretty much everything that all three of you have already said. So I don't really have too much more to add to it. Just it's important that we definitely spread the word. As Gary said, the website battleforthenet.com. We'll leave a link in the actual post for this as well. But definitely should voice your opinion, voice your concerns. And, we definitely have to be prepared for what could happen. But I do believe it will pass, as Dana said. I mean, I have no doubt about that. So you just have to prepare. It's very much similar to what happened with the election. We have to live with that now. A lot of people may disagree. Pretty sure a lot of people disagree with what happened with that. But listen, we have to live with it now. It's done. It's in the past. Just have to see what happens moving forward in the future and be prepared for whatever happens as a result of these decisions that were made. So, hopefully, I will say, hopefully all this stuff makes people wake up and more aware to their surroundings. That's the most important thing that you should take away from all of this. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, so I want to say this as well. I want to ask this question specifically to Dana. But you guys, also answer as well. But we know that this is gonna impact Netflix heavy. Not just Netflix, but a lot of distribution platforms, and content platforms and stuff like that. But this in combination with Disney setting up their own streaming service now, and Disney already does, like, they do a lot with the media. They own ESPN, so they have a lot of power already. So do you think that Netflix is going to be able to sustain themselves with Disney entering the streaming game and with this whole anti net neutrality bill coming along?
No. Just if you take away all of the Disney and Marvel content alone, aside from, like, say, Black Mirror, what else do you really have? Not that much. So, no, it's unfortunate. And even if the whole net neutrality thing was to work out for the best, they don't really have that content that, you know, people are running to. It's usually all of the Marvel shows, which they won't have, or House of Cards, which we all know that debacle. So not really.
Man, Kevin Spacey messed up everything.
Kevin Spacey, it is all Kevin Spacey and Harvey Weinstein's fault. It's his fault, Harvey Weinstein.
Well, in all honesty, I mean, I think there's a little bit more there that's offered by Netflix that people that just doesn't get a lot of shine, because I think that people focus on really what's the trending thing like right now, you know, between the Marvel shows, the House of Cards stuff, obviously Stranger Things, and you know, you get those shows that are really the pull towards Netflix for as a service like that. But I still think that there's still more that's offered there besides the documentaries, besides the other original series that they have on there, some of which doesn't get a lot of shine because maybe it's not up to the same quality, as well as also just the ease of use of the offering of the shows and the movies that they have on there that's readily available for people, a little bit more better so than a lot of the other services, including Hulu, including Amazon Prime Video, including even YouTube to an extent. You know, there's still some value there. I just feel like, again, Netflix and a couple other companies are going to get the brunt of this, or at least going to be kind of thrust into the spotlight and almost be a little bit kind of like the punching bag for when this stuff starts to go down, because they're so popular. And if it's obviously going to make an impact with a lot of people when those types of services are affected. I think it's going to get even worse when you start seeing places like other social media like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Periscope start to get affected, especially when things start to become a little bit more politically charged at some point. I think that's when this stuff is really going to get bad. I mean, we've already got some of that now. Not to get too much into politics, as you guys know, I don't really like talking politics all that much, but I feel like that's when things get at its worst because of again, people wanting to push one way or another, whether it's for an agenda, whether it's for a result, an outcome, or just for the sake of being right or being on the right side. That's when I feel like things will get really bad with all this.
I agree. One comment that I want to make also, I believe that as we have seen in business and pretty much throughout history, any company that goes through certain things, they have to pivot and make a change. So obviously, yeah, as you all mentioned, Netflix would be impacted by this heavily. I think that the fact that Netflix is offered on so many platforms and the fact that it has a lot of different content, I mean, they obviously will have to come up with other shows that they can put out there. We know that they're capable of doing that because they got, like I said, Stranger Things is on there. House of Cards, yeah, it's over. That's finished, done. They can have spinoffs from it, and maybe that will still gain some type of popularity, but pretty much they have to pivot and think of other different shows to have. But what I'm saying is because they are on so many platforms, on so many devices, I'm pretty sure that they will still have an audience. They just have to figure out how to keep that audience engaged and how to keep the service going amidst all these changes. Pretty much everybody's going to have to do that when these things happen. You know, massive changes like this, you have to think to yourself, well, how can I change and still add value to my audience and get my product out there? So everybody's going to have to think about these things. But Netflix, I think they'll still be okay depending on how the decisions that they make moving forward. Now, Stranger Things is still a very popular show. We already know that they're going to have another season of that. So that's one thing you can say that's great. They still have these other deals with these other shows that, you know, the show may be right now on TV, the current season, but you still have access to the other seasons prior to that. So, I mean, it depends. It depends. But yeah, they will be impacted when Disney decides to do its own thing. But at the other end of that, Disney, I think, would also be impacted as well and face their own challenges with all this stuff that once it goes down. I mean, it's going to impact everybody. So it's all a matter of what are these companies going to do to try and make the situation still work in their favor. And we'll have to see how all that pans out. But no doubt about it, when the bill does get passed, you know, because, I mean, the current plan for the administration is to undo everything that was done by the previous president. So it's going to happen. And as JJ said, you know, I don't like talking about politics that much either, but I'm very curious to see what happens as a result of all of this. But we don't really know right now. We just have to wait and see. But that's all I was going to say on the matter. I don't know if Gary, you had anything else you was going to add or say.
Not too much really, but I just want to say, like, I want to be the ultimate pessimist and be like, last year we had Brexit, we had Trump, and now this year it looks like, we're gonna have this, like we're gonna have people controlling our internet access, and it's very unfortunate. So I would just urge everyone in the US to, visit that website, battleforthenet.com, and just do what you can to make sure that, this doesn't get passed.
That I agree 100% with what you said, and to add on to that, I also would encourage anyone out there, if you feel as though you're trying to be restricted from doing anything, know that what power you do have, you still do have some power in some of the things that you do. So I would definitely encourage you to take the action to still be inspired to do what you want to do. Don't let anyone tell you you can't do anything. If you have something you want to achieve, a dream you want to go after, still go after it. Don't let anyone try to restrict you and tell you you can't do it, because you have to be able to think beyond that and look at the bigger picture. So that is the advice that that I would give. But yeah, as Gary said, definitely check out the website. Once again, battleforthenet.com. Sign the petition. And again, be prepared for the changes that we will experience, because we're going to experience a lot more changes. This is only really the first year that this stuff has started with the new person in office. So be prepared for what other stuff we have to deal with. It is what it is.